Hello, my name is Michelle, and on behalf of Group 14, I will be reviewing the presentation regarding environmental impacts of disappearing honeybees in relation to colony collapse disorder with a focus on pesticides as a potential cause. In 2006, beekeepers began to notice a swift decline in the amount of honeybees in their colonies. Bees began to disappear with no indication of disease, infestation, or cause at all. The bees left and failed to return to their hives. The loss of honeybees has been a global epidemic, and the value of honeybees has been estimated at $14 million for U.S. agriculture and $215 billion worldwide. So what's the problem? The total number of managed honeybee colonies has decreased from 5 million in 1940 to only 2.5 million today. If honeybee loss continues, it could threaten the economic viability of the bee pollination industry. The cost of bee pollination services will rise, and those increased costs would ultimately be passed on to consumers through higher food costs. Farmers will experience reduced crop yields, resulting in the need to use greater acreage and more resources in crop production. Food availability may be reduced as bees are vitally important in the production of fruit, vegetable, and seed crops. Colony collapse disorder will also result in loss of income for beekeepers. The population of honeybees is also concerning because bees are what is known as indicator species, meaning the declining bee population may be indicative of overall decline in health of our environment. At the same time, the call for hives to provide pollination services has continued to increase. This presentation will review and define colony collapse disorder, which I may also refer to as CCD. It will discuss the main suspected causes with an emphasis on pesticide exposure, explain why honeybees matter, and how health, environmental, and economical problematic potentials could arise from CCD. We will also address challenges and solutions to consider in the future research and development, as well as policy implications in relation to pesticide control. Scientists name the phenomenon colony collapse disorder, which according to the United States Department of Agriculture is defined as a dead colony with no adult bees or dead bee bodies, but with a live queen and usually honey and immature bees still present. No specific cause has been pinpointed for colony collapse disorder, and we will be discussing this in future slides. This graph gives us a good numerical insight into the honeybee colonies in the United States that have been affected. As we can see, the percentage lost over the winter of the past decade has remained in the 20 to 30% range. In addition to the graph form of loss annually, Be Informed, which is an organization, also created a map depicting the states affected and which have been affected the most heavily. The wide range of loss contributes to the question of what is causing CCD. So the causes of a colony collapse disorder are still under investigation and are not yet very well understood. Currently, any realistic and conceivable cause is a possibility, and most scientists agree that there is no single cause for CCD. Nevertheless, there are potential and leading etiological factors that make us be more or less sure of their contributions to CCD. And as new information becomes available, new causes are added and some may be dismissed as potential causes. We will discuss pesticides, especially neonicotinoids, in more detail than other causes just due to the highly suggestive impact on CCD. The other causes are not enumerated in any specific order due to a lack of sufficient knowledge confirming the priority of one above another. Neonicotinoids are systemic insecticides known to cause harm to honeybees and suggested as a potential main cause for CCD. These toxicants accumulate and persist in soil for years, and they are water-soluble and exist in treated plants from seed to harvest. There are two subclasses of neonicotinoids, nitroguanidines and cyanoamidines. Both are highly toxic and cause acute effects. The cyanoamidines cause a less acutely toxic effect and include thiacloprid and acetamiprid. There is a possible synergism of insecticides with other agrochemicals For example, DMI fungicides have the ability to interact with other insecticides to cause synergism of harmful effects on the honeybees. And these fungicides increase the toxicity effects of A's timiprid, and thiocloprid as much as 224 times. Acute toxicity is an acute exposure to pesticides on bees that can have a range of effects like general agitation, wing paralysis, uncoordinated movements, and arching of the abdomen that's similar to the sting effect. Other classes of pesticides are generally more lethal to honeybees than neonicotinoids. Sublethal toxicity is what happens when pesticide amounts are too little to kill the bees. However, they can distribute the cognitive abilities, communications, behaviors, and physiology of the bees. The chronic and cumulative effects is when neonicotinoids bind to the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors in the insect's brains and accumulate over time. The accumulation tends to have grave effects on bees and can result in paralysis and death. Habitat affects and reduces the forage. So use of chemicals in bee colonies. Many chemicals the beekeepers use to keep the bees healthy are productive, but are suspected to have sublethal effects. The routine colony management that beekeepers perform, like hive splitting and swarm control, etc., is another factor that adds to the worsening of CCD. Migratory beekeeping is when beekeepers rent their hives to farmers' pollination, or for pollination rather. This may affect the orientation of bees to their hives, which is very vital. Beside the stress on the bees due to transportations for long miles, it may cause spreading of bee diseases to new areas. And the factor of a lack of genetic diversity is related to the queen source quality that lacks biodiversity, which makes the bees more susceptible to any disease or pest invading the colony. Now, although genetically modified crops are not conclusive, it's been theorized that such plants whose seeds were dipped in insecticides before planting may appear later in the plant's nectars and pollen. Scientists propose that the cause of nutritional fitness, and they suggested this because malnutrition is a stressor to bees and causes weakness in the immune system. Little information exists currently, though, to support this claim, so it is a weakness in research and a challenge that researchers face. Traditional bee diseases are suggested as potential exacerbating factors, but not likely to be responsible for causing CCD. Varroa mites. These are parasites, and they're the most destructive killer of honeybees and can also transmit viruses. Yet many of the colonies that show symptoms of CCD may actually have the varroa mite population under control. It's suggested that new and unidentified diseases may cause CCD, especially if newly introduced. An example of this is the new Microsporidian species Nosema ceranae that cause the affected honeybees to abandon their colonies altogether. Another example is the Israeli acute paralysis virus. It's a newly discovered virus, and it may also play a role in causing CCD. The chain reaction due to climate change, which results in erratic weather patterns and environmental changes, may also contribute, as well as electromagnetic radiation. Now, this has been suggested, but its validity has been disputed. Finally, many scientists believe that CCD is caused by the interaction of a combination of many factors, and this is referred to as a synergism of all causes. As we review the section, Why Bees Matter, it's important to keep in mind the health, environmental, and economical problematic potentials that could arise if honeybee collapse disorder is not remedied. Bees, along with butterflies and other insects, are the major sources of plant and crop pollinators in the United States and around the world. In this section, we'll focus on why bees are important as they pertain to the United States. Bees create genetic diversity among plants and crops through a process called cross-pollination, which will be explained later. Finally, letting bees do the work for us creates significant financial advantages. From an agricultural perspective, bees pollinate close to a third of the crops in the United States. Some examples include apples, broccoli, melon, and avocados. And interestingly, almonds completely rely on pollination by bees. Crops like alfalfa that are used for feed and livestock are affected as well, so it's easy to see how bees influence more than just the plants themselves. And of course, honey. And entomologists agree that losing bees will have serious implications. Next, bees have significant effects on biodiversity among flowering plants. They are extremely important cross-pollinators, and this is a good thing because it prevents inbreeding, which makes plants less susceptible to pests. Industrial agriculture has this problem, and they combat it with pesticides. Cross-pollination by bees creates hybrids and allow for the possibility of adaptation. And this is important if the goal is to get away from relying on pesticides. This illustration demonstrates the process of cross-pollination, which, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, is the transfer of pollen from an anther of a flower of one plant to a stigma of a flower of another plant of the same species, of course. Finally, bees are responsible for pollinating close to $15 billion worth of food and $150 million worth of honey every year. There are alternatives for crop pollination if the bees disappear, but they are significantly more expensive. One is hand pollination, which is exactly what it sounds like. And alternatively, there's a mechanical pollination, which involves large farm vehicles or planes, and these methods are expected to cost $300 more per acre. So you can imagine that these costs will be passed onto the consumer, resulting in higher food prices. We've known about the disappearance of honeybees for some time now, so what's currently being done about it? In May of 2015, the Obama administration developed a national strategy to promote the health of honeybees, which contribute to the National Strategy to Promote the Health of Honeybees and Other Pollinators strategy. Yes, that's the title. The Pollinator Health Task, it's a task force. It was appointed to tackle and reduce the impact of multiple stressors on pollinator health, and it focused largely on increasing and improving pollinator habitats. The initiative includes pollinator public education and outreach, a research action plan, developing public and private partnerships, implementing federal land management, and protecting pollinators from being exposed to pesticides. According to the USDA website, the best action the public can take to improve honeybee survival is not to use pesticides indiscriminately. In particular, the public should avoid applying pesticides during midday hours when bees are most likely to be out foraging for nectar and pollen off of flowering plants. And in addition, communities can plant pollinator-friendly plants, and these plants are great sources of nectar and pollen, such as red clover, foxglove, bee balm, Joe Pye weed, and other native plants. I have never heard of some of these, but obviously they're very accessible to research about online. Lastly, you can support companies that support bee research and breeding programs. Another viable solution toward increasing the bee population is implementing programs that teach and train urban residents to become amateur beekeepers. So many cities are now offering startup assistance to a growing number of hobbyists of all ages interested in beekeeping. Plus, educating urban populations about plant diversity in municipal gardens will actually enhance both bee habitats and bee health by increased awareness. With the increased interest in awareness and the profound importance of nurturing a much larger bee population globally, the progress dividends for both humanity and the planet will prove immeasurable. A focus on honeybee health is detrimental, so where best to start with than with the beekeepers themselves? In order to maintain colony health, beekeepers are advised to monitor for varroa mites and to use approved pesticides according to package instructions when needing in order to keep colonies well nourished. And these include making sure forage availability or providing supplemental feeding when necessary, and to follow regional best practices, which can easily be found online. And colonies experiencing colony collapse disorder should not be combined with healthy colonies, Any equipment used with a colony that is experiencing CCD